Have you ever spotted something strange in the sky? Maybe a light moving in an unusual way on a dark night? Or perhaps you witnessed a metallic disc floating in broad daylight? Know that you're not alone. What you saw might have been a UFO or unidentified flying object. Nowadays, NASA refers to this as UAP, which stands for Unexplained Aerial Phenomenon. In some sources, the A is interpreted as anomalous instead of aerial, as the terminology is still not fully established. But in this video, we're going to stick with the old term, UFO. UFOs are a topic that always provokes strong opinions. Some people firmly believe these objects are of extraterrestrial origin, while others seek natural explanations. My intention here is to invite you to examine the long history of strange observations in the sky in a serious and impartial way. After all, these sightings have a very ancient history in humanity. How did these phenomena come to be associated with aliens? And why has the subject become so controversial? In a broad overview, groups that have investigated the phenomenon, from NASA's recent independent committee to the Blue Book project of the 50s and 60s, have reached some common conclusions. First, most UFO reports have a natural explanation. This is a fact. Even those who believe in the extraterrestrial origin of UFOs agree with this statement. Second, there is a small but significant portion of reports that truly defy any known explanation. These are the true UFOs, observations made by credible people that cannot be easily explained. And third, this is a topic that is difficult to study rigorously due to both the stigma and the lack of quality data. And it is precisely because of this third point that we're starting today's video. Nowadays, it is very complicated to talk about UFOs in a neutral way, and we're going to understand why. To make everything clear, this research is based on a critical analysis of official US government documents on UFOs. But it's important to remember that UFOs are a global phenomenon, and many countries have their own stories and complicated relationships between governments, military forces, and reports of strange sightings. Interest in UFOs isn't limited to just one nation. Rather, curiosity about unexplained aerial phenomena is shared globally. Several countries, including the United Kingdom, France, and Russia, have invested in initiatives to investigate these phenomena, whether through government agencies like GAPAN in France, or through international collaborations that seek to better understand what's happening in the skies around the world. These initiatives not only expand the database of sightings but also promote a valuable exchange of information between nations, which can help unravel the mystery surrounding UFOs. Now let's talk about the Foo Fighters, but not the band. The name of the band, led by Dave Grohl, was inspired by an aerial phenomenon observed by pilots during World War II. Starting in 1942, several U.S. Air Force pilots reported strange lights following their planes at a certain distance. These lights were called Foo Fighters, a slang term for illusory fighters, meaning ghost fighter planes. The Foo Fighters were observed on various fronts around the world, from Europe to Japan. But the behavior and colors of the lights varied depending on the location. These observations became so common that the reports became almost casual. Oh, we saw more Foo Fighters this Thursday, there they are again. The first hypothesis was that the lights might be some kind of unknown wartime equipment by the Allies. But after the war, it became clear that the enemies also saw the Foo Fighters and had no idea what they were. Even after investigations, the mystery continued, and reports of strange sightings in the sky continued, especially in Sweden, Norway, and Finland, countries of special interest to the US government due to their proximity to the Soviet Union. In the post-World War II period, with the beginning of the Cold War, the United States feared that UFOs were some new Soviet technology being tested. And so, American intelligence began to take UFOs seriously. 1947 was an iconic year for strange sightings. It was when the first description of a UFO as a flying disc occurred, and it was also the year of the famous Roswell incident, one of the most well-known and controversial UFO cases in history. At the time, the US Air Force publicly assured that everything was under control and that they were investigating the mysteries, but internally, there was a significant division of opinions about what exactly these UFOs were. Some believed they could be unknown atmospheric phenomena, others thought they were Soviet technologies, and there were even those who believed they could be secret projects of the US government. Some military personnel also suggested that UFOs were some kind of collective hallucination. The Air Force was willing to dismiss civilian reports as hallucinations, but ignoring the reports from their own trained pilots would be a betrayal. So, in general, only reports from military personnel were taken seriously. In 1947, the Air Force agreed that the issue needed to be investigated more deeply. In 1948, a centralized UFO investigation project, Project Sign, was created. Part of the motivation to take the matter seriously came from the first fatal accident related to a UFO. An American pilot died while trying to pursue a UFO in early 1948. And to make matters worse, that UFO was probably just a skyhook balloon that the US government was secretly developing. If there had been coordination among the various intelligence agencies, this accident could have been avoided. Another example of lack of coordination was when a secret espionage balloon project was accidentally revealed by a popular magazine as an explanation for UFOs before Project Sign knew about it. Despite these difficulties, Project Sign moved forward and began reaching the first official conclusions about UFOs. According to the project, part of the UFOs were real, representing a genuine phenomenon that couldn't be easily explained and wasn't the result of hallucination or confusion by the observers. At the end of 1948, a new hypothesis was raised by the project: the possibility that UFOs were ships from outside Earth, in other words, aliens. This hypothesis had a big impact and entered the popular imagination. The Pentagon, however, responded with a letter emphasizing that the origin of UFOs was unknown, suggesting between the lines that the alien hypothesis had no merit. The final report of the Air Force intelligence in 1948 mentioned only two possibilities: secret American or Soviet projects. Even so, Project Sign refused to rule out any hypothesis, including the alien one. This insistence may have contributed to the closure of Sign, which was replaced by Project Grudge. This new project was extremely skeptical of new hypotheses about UFOs, especially the alien one. It seemed to aim to find natural explanations for all UFO reports, to the point that in 1950, it stopped producing public reports on the subject. Eventually, reports were resumed by Project Blue Book, which maintained the stance of trying to explain all UFO reports naturally, avoiding admitting that some cases might be truly inexplicable. From the outside, it seemed that the UFO issue was resolved, but internally, the divergence of opinions was at its peak. The situation was so complicated that there were at least 5 different opinions being defended within the Air Force, Navy, and Pentagon. The first opinion was that all UFOs could be identified with sufficient information. This view was widely reflected in the Grudge and Blue Book projects. The second opinion was that UFOs represented a new and unknown phenomenon but did not pose a threat to the United States, so the issue should be left to scientists. Here it's important to note that in the armed forces, loyalty and obedience are valued more than curiosity, which may explain why many military personnel didn't take the UFO issue seriously. However, there were members of the Army who had their own experiences with UFOs and were less willing to ignore the subject. Additionally, the Pentagon and other civilian intelligence agencies seemed more curious about UFOs than the Air Force. The other 3 opinions agreed that UFOs were important and needed to be investigated seriously, but they disagreed on the most likely origin. The 2 most popular hypotheses were of Soviet origin and American secret origin, with the alien hypothesis being the least popular. This dissonance of opinions was also reflected in the division of efforts. On one hand, the Blue Book and Grudge projects publicly downplayed the seriousness of the issue, while internally, less public study groups were formed to investigate the matter. For example, Stephen Poston led an investigation into the possible Soviet origin of UFOs in Europe in the late 1940s. When he returned to the United States in the 1950s, he was convinced that not all UFOs were of Soviet origin and began to lead a special study group on the issue, which was separate from the public efforts of the Air Force. The lack of organization and cohesion in American intelligence regarding UFOs was tested in 1952, a year with an extremely high number of UFO reports. This wave culminated in the Washington UFO incident, where for 2 weeks, objects with strange behaviors were detected by radars around the U.S. Capitol, coinciding with visual sightings of bright lights and fireballs in the sky. This event challenged the Air Force's public denial of the importance of UFOs. The government needed to provide a response to the public, who were frightened, and the news about UFOs was spreading across the country. behind the scenes, a new possibility about the origin of UFOs worried American intelligence. The idea that UFOs might be part of a Soviet psychological warfare aimed at undermining Americans' confidence in their own military and government. The main evidence for this was that while newspapers around the world reported UFOs in 1952, nothing about the subject was published in the Soviet press, suggesting censorship. With this hypothesis in mind, American military leaders decided to act, and after the Washington UFO incident, the Air Force's priority became minimizing public fear and protecting it from possible Soviet psychological attacks. Discovering the truth about UFOs became a secondary issue, so much so that in press conferences about the Washington events, General Samford not only downplayed the seriousness of UFOs, but also mocked reporters who treated the subject seriously. This strategy of mixing silence and mockery worked, and a stigma began to form around UFOs. By the late 1950s, treating the subject seriously was frowned upon. However, internally, the president himself asked the CIA to take the issue seriously. The result of this request clearly shows the dissonance between how American intelligence presented UFOs to the public and how they dealt with the subject internally. The CIA created two research groups. One, more public, led by Ray Gordon, used information collected by the Air Force and ended up reproducing the discourse that UFOs were not significant. The other group, more discreet, was led by an assistant director of the CIA, Marshall Shadwell. There is evidence that the most intriguing cases were forwarded directly to Shadwell's group, not the public efforts. However, the exact activities of this group are not transparent. Shadwell sent his first UFO report in September 1952, shortly after the Washington incident. In it, he stated that he considered the Air Force's opinion of dismissing UFOs as something serious to be honest but based on poorly done work. For Shadwell, the Air Force had already reached its conclusions before even studying the issue thoroughly. He also indicated that the phenomenon seemed to be a global fact, with some cases being truly inexplicable even to the most skeptical. The area was full of stigma and prejudice, and the report concluded by stating that UFOs deserve serious investigation by competent and unbiased experts. However, as far as we know, Shadwell's suggestions for a more serious investigation were largely ignored. Any serious effort would require resources, and during the Cold War, every dollar spent on UFOs was a dollar less spent on preparing for a possible nuclear war with the Soviets. This is a good summary of the initial history of UFOs, a controversial topic that internally divided American intelligence. The most crucial point is the dissonance between how UFOs were presented to the public to create a stigma and downplay the issue and how they were treated internally as something worthy of investigation. I'll be honest, looking at it this way, it's hard not to imagine that perhaps some secret project still undisclosed discovered much more than what has been made public. So, let's consider the idea of a real conspiracy that hides secrets about UFOs, whether they're an ultra-secret military project, truly extraterrestrial, or something completely different. Since 1953, nothing has really changed in the status quo of UFOs. The topic is still shrouded in stigma. Sometimes private groups investigate a bit or public interest resurfaces, but the subject is soon forgotten after some generic government or military statements. Public interest is generally ridiculed or ignored, so it's not surprising that the idea that something is being actively hidden has arisen. The most widespread hypothesis is that UFOs are unknown natural phenomena that manage to fool radars and witnesses. But if that's all there is to it, why have UFOs become taboo? Because in the 1950s, American military communication turned UFOs into taboo, fearing they were part of a Soviet psychological attack. And since then, no one has had the will to look at the issue honestly and seriously. There are indications that some groups within American intelligence investigated UFOs more seriously on their own, like the groups led by Poisson and Shadwell. Additionally, American military personnel probably maintained contact with some private groups studying UFOs in the 1950s and 60s. And if any of these groups reached any discovery, it was never made public. Here, I'll endorse the conspiracies a bit because if we want to understand the UFO phenomenon from a social perspective, conspiracies are an important part. If there's a secret surrounding UFOs, it's being very well kept. No direct evidence of this secret has been revealed, and all we have are often inconsistent reports pointing to things that cannot be proven or even include proven lies, like those fake American aliens. If there's a secret, it's very well kept. And to keep such a secret, few people need to be involved. For example, during World War II, Bletchley Park, a secret war effort in England, involved about 2,000 people who broke the Enigma machine code, helping to win the war. Historically, this was one of the best-kept secrets in history, but English reporters and Soviet spies discovered what was happening there. 2,000 people were too many to keep a complex secret, so if there's a serious secret about UFOs, it's probably kept by dozens, or at most, a few hundred people. The secret couldn't involve a large organization like NASA, and probably wouldn't include high-profile positions. As the Manhattan Project showed, scientists are terrible at keeping secrets. If you want to keep something truly secret, minimize the number of scientists involved. The United States has mechanisms to create ultra-secret projects with an extremely limited number of people involved. These are the so-called special access programs, some of which are not even informed to the American president. There have even been debates about secret projects consuming large amounts of money with no public oversight. And just to be clear, I'm not saying the US government knows that UFOs are aliens and is hiding it, but there are mechanisms in the US government to keep secrets very well. Richard Doty, for example, claimed to have spread rumors of aliens and UFOs to cover up tests of secret government aircraft, which is basically the opposite of the usual conspiracy. His account isn't particularly reliable, but that's the point. You can't reach any conclusions about what the US government knows or doesn't know based solely on people's accounts. The same goes for other governments' relations with UFOs. Perhaps the main argument in favor of something more behind UFOs is the interest of public figures who have nothing to gain by insisting on the issue. A notable example is John Podesta, a political consultant who worked for several US presidents and was White House Chief of Staff during Obama's presidency. Podesta said his biggest failure as Chief of Staff was not being able to bring to light what the US government knows about UFOs. Podesta, a man who makes a living electing presidents, has nothing to gain by associating himself with possible conspiracies. In fact, this interest probably hurts more than helps his career, and he's not alone. The official and declared interest in UFOs seems to have resurfaced in recent years. Even the traditionally reserved US Navy has made it easier to report UFO sightings recently. You can't guarantee that the United States is hiding a secret that will change the world, but you also can't guarantee that it isn't. And this lack of transparency is precisely the problem pointed out by figures like Podesta. This problem is so evident that even someone who held the position of White House Chief of Staff is unable to discover the truth, or even if there's a truth to be discovered. This brings us to NASA's 2023 Independent UAP Studies Committee. Directly, the committee concluded that there is a small but real portion of UFOs that are true UFOs, about 2%. What this means is that these cases cannot be explained by known phenomena, but this isn't confirmation that they have an extraterrestrial origin. NASA's committee aimed to assess what can be known about UFOs from sources of information that are no longer classified and recommend measures to learn more about the subject. Basically, identifying the limitations that prevent public knowledge about UFOs and how we can overcome them. The limitations pointed out by the committee are of a social, bureaucratic, and technical nature. Socially, the stigma around UFOs as something silly hinders both data collection and reports, whether from experiments or from ordinary people with smartphones. It also makes it difficult to find scientists willing to study the issue seriously. In the 1960s, one of the Blue Book consultant astronomers conducted a survey among his fellow astronomers about UFOs. Many of them were interested in investigating the matter, but they didn't admit it publicly for fear of ridicule. Scientists afraid to investigate the unknown out of shame. That's a big problem in the logic of science. That's why NASA's report emphasizes the need to change the social stigma surrounding UFOs and strange phenomena to allow for serious study. Bureaucratically, there's a problem with data being kept secret. Most UFO data is obtained from military sources and is classified as secret, not necessarily because it's amazing, but because it was captured by sensors with secret technology. For example, if an American fighter jet's camera takes a picture of a rat entering a sewer, that photo will be secret, not because of the rat, but because of the camera. This prevents other nations from discovering US technological capabilities and finding weaknesses. However, even the available data is often not of high quality, as it is captured accidentally with equipment not calibrated to study UFOs. And here comes NASA's big proposal, which, if implemented, will be the first real change in UFO study in 70 years. NASA proposed methods to study UFOs as a real science. This means thinking about detection systems dedicated to studying UFOs, calibrated for this task, and of civilian origin, which means that the generated data would be open to everyone. This would remove the exclusivity of UFO study from military and intelligence agencies, initiating a new era of research with scientific methods, seriousness, and rigor. For example, the idea is to study with radars, cameras, and passive detectors to create a database of non-extraordinary events. That is, identified flying objects, IFOs. With this base established, simple and inexpensive sensors could be used to detect extraordinary events that deviate from this norm, the true UFOs. These simple sensors would trigger more specific and precise sensors to intentionally collect information about UFOs. In addition, the collected data could be compared with weather data, civil aviation data, or even with reports from people who filmed strange phenomena in the sky. In summary, this is an honest attempt to study UFOs as something scientific. Similar methods are used to detect particles or rare events in physics experiments. If the committee's proposal is followed, UFOs will become a real and serious research topic by NASA, the agency best equipped to handle the issue in the United States. This is the first sign that the public view of UFOs may change in 70 years. If one day we have confirmation that UFOs are really of extraterrestrial origin, it will be an incredible day to be alive. But we can't let our desire for fantastic answers interfere with the search for truth. We know that most cases have mundane explanations, but we need to approach the subject with scientific rigor if we really want to verify whether the unexplained cases could have an extraterrestrial origin. I'm excited to see that after nearly 70 years, we're starting to take the subject more seriously. Not because I believe that the explanation for these phenomena lies beyond Earth, but because I want to know the truth, even if it's disappointing. The main characteristic we must keep in mind is the pursuit of data in a serious and scientific manner, in an open and transparent way, so we can draw conclusions based on what humanity does best, discovering the unknown. And you? Where do you stand on the discussion? I'd love to hear your opinion in the comments. Thank you very much, and see you next time.